Today I want to talk about fractions. Before I do that, let me give you a quick review on what we've done so far this week, which is all about adding and subtracting positive and negative numbers. All right, so let's say we have 8 minus 10. 8 minus 10. Is that not showing up on the screen? Let me push the magic button and see if it'll appear. Come on, button. There we go. All right, 8 minus 10. Sometimes this standard gets a little crazy and it gets a little too confusing and things get more difficult than what they really need to be. Some people will look at this and say, does that mean it's a negative 10 or am I subtracting 10? You're overthinking it. It's just 8 minus 10. Think how easy it would be if it was 10 minus 8. If it was 10 minus 8, you've known since probably first grade that that answer is 2. Right? But when it becomes 8 minus 10, it gets a little more difficult because you can't take 10 away from 8. If you have 8 pieces of pizza and I say, give me 10, you're going to look at me like I'm crazy. Right? But when it comes to numbers on the board, you can take 10 away from 8. When it comes to money and a bank account, you can take 10 away from 8. You're left with negative 2. When it comes to pizza and real world tangible objects, it's really hard to represent a negative number or a negative piece of pizza. But when it comes to money and numbers on a board, you can go below 0. You can represent negatives. So 8 minus 10 is 2 below 0. All right, it's 2, but it's negative 2. Just like 10 minus 8 is 2, this is 2, but it's 2 below 0. It's minus 2. So if you try and just simplify it a little bit like that, then maybe if you're having trouble with this standard, that'll make it easier for you. When it really gets crazy is when you start putting 2 signs in a row. So say you have 8 plus a negative 10 or 8 minus a positive 10, which you're not going to see it written that way hardly ever. Instead of writing it like this, they'll just write it like that. If you don't see a little minus sign up here like that, that means it's not negative, it's positive. So you're taking away $10 from $8. All right, this is adding $10 in debt. This is adding a negative amount to your positive amount. It's adding more negatives than you have positives. You're adding $10 of debt to your $8. That's going to bring you down below 0, 2 below 0. This is taking out of your account, subtracting, withdrawing out of your account 10 positive dollars. You're taking $10 out of your account and you only had 8 in there to begin with. So now you're at negative 2. These all represent negative 2. So I don't know. I'm about to say I don't know why they do it like this, but I guess I do know why. It's to represent banking, really, is the best way I can explain it. You can withdraw money, you could add debt, you could just say minus $10. Let's just take $10 out of there. All right, they all mean the same thing. They all mean you started with 8, you took away 10, you're left with negative 2. So that's where we've been going this whole week, is to try and get you to understand what's going on when you start seeing a bunch of different ways to say the same thing. Yesterday, when you had the one worksheet that said write an equivalent addition expression, this is what they wanted you to do. They gave you this, said 8 minus 10, rewrite it as an addition problem with a plus sign, but with the same answer, equivalent addition. And the way you do that is you add $10 in debt to your account. You plus a minus. Plus a minus or minus a plus equal the same thing, but they don't want you to write it like this because technically this is still a subtraction problem. This is subtracting a positive amount, which is what you're doing here, and that's what you started with. So if you said this was your answer on the worksheet yesterday, all you really did was put a plus sign there, and it's implied that it's a plus sign. So you really had to do this. You had to turn your subtraction problem into an addition problem, but have the same answer. So you had to add a negative amount debt into your account to get you down to -2. So everything we're doing in this standard all revolves around that. They'll just try and make the numbers harder to work with because, they like to mess with you. So you'll throw in decimals, which we did a little bit of yesterday, and now today they'll throw in fractions. So we need a little reminder on how to add and subtract fractions. Let's say it's 2/3 plus 3/4. The answer to that is not 5/7. Please don't ever write that down on a paper that you show me, because I might crumple it up and throw it in the garbage and then say thank you, good try, because I'm very nice like that. All right, you can't add the denominators together. When you add and subtract fractions, you don't add the denominators together. In fact, you can't even add these together until the denominators are the same numbers. So they're not the same number, so we have to make them the same number by finding the least common multiple. What's the smallest number that 3 and 4 both go into evenly? It's 12. 3 goes into 12 and 4 goes into 12. So we're going to turn these into two new fractions that have a 12 as the denominator. And then we have to ask ourselves, how did we get from 3 to 12? We multiplied it by 4. And whatever you do to the denominator, you have to do to the numerator. So we have to multiply 2 by 4. So that becomes an 8. 8/12 reduces to 2/3. How did you get from 4 to 12? You multiplied it by 3. So if you multiply the denominator by 3, you have to multiply the numerator by 3. 3 times 3 is 9. So now you've got a common denominator. Now you can add your numerators together. Don't add the denominators. Just like you did not add them here to make it 7, you do not add them here to make it 24. They stay the same. So you end up with 17 over 12. Now, some people are going to want to say that's 1 5/12. I'm not the person that's going to tell you have to do that. So if you prefer to reduce it to that, you can, but you don't have to. You can leave it as 17 over 12. What I am going to ask you to do is say your answer for some problem is 6 over 4. I'm going to want you to reduce that to 3 over 2. All right, so you can leave it in fraction form, just reduce it down, simplify it. 6 over 4 is the same thing as 3 over 2. All right, the rest of the rules apply. The rest of the strategies that we've been doing this week apply. So what I mean is, let's say you've got -7 plus a -2.5. All right, first of all, think to yourself, where are we starting? We're starting at -7. We're $7 in debt. And what are we doing? After we're done doing the math here, are we going to be more in debt? Is this going to be -9? Or are we going to be less in debt? Is this going to be like -5 or -4? Which way are we going? Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Are we putting more money in our account, or are we going farther in debt? And the answer is we're going farther in debt. We're putting something into the account, we're depositing something into the account, but that thing that we're putting into the account is a negative number. It's debt. So we're adding more debt. So we're going to be farther in debt than $7. We're going to be $2.50 more in debt. Well, 7 and 2 is 9 plus another half. That's 9.5. So we're $9.50 in debt. So you see how when it's small numbers, you can kind of work through this in your head. What you really is beneficial to you, because if you don't do this in your head, it's really hard to combine these together with just rules of fractions and whole numbers. How are you supposed to do that when this has a denominator, this doesn't even have a fraction? It gets real messy. So I'm just telling you that the problems for today are simpler numbers like this. So I want you to try and think them through and do them in your head a little bit, instead of turning this into 5/4 and this into 28/4. You might be like, whoa, what did you just say? Well, what I just said was basically getting common denominators for both of these. And to do that, you'd have to do the old around the world. Turn this into a 2 times a 2 plus a 1, which is 5/2. And this was 7/1, and we want it to be over 2. So we would double both of these. So we'd say that's 14/2. And then we could add these together, and then we could turn it into a negative and flip it all back around, and it gets all crazy and confusing, when really all you have to do is ask yourself, are we going to end up with less money in debt or more money in debt? Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Are we going to owe more or less by the time we're done with this? And we're adding debt, so we're going to owe more. This is a bad thing. How much more? $2.50 more than the 7 we already know. And I think you guys can figure out that 2.5 more than 7 is 9.5. So this is negative 9.5. So let's try and keep it simple like that. Try and do these in your head as much as possible by the method I was just showing you here. And then we'll go over it on Friday. If it's totally got you confused, I'll try and straighten things out as best as possible I can for you on Friday. But I think you're going to like this.